Thank you, Dr. Stu and Dr. L. I'm delighted to be here to talk with you about email with patients, problem or opportunity. Using email with patients in our practices is really a bit of a tricky business. So I want to walk you through a couple of key steps that you need to consider before you decide whether or not using email with patients is the right solution for your practice. I really liked Chris Hadfield's statement about anticipating problems and figuring out how to solve them is actually the opposite of worrying. It's productive. And it certainly applies about trying new technology and new approaches in your practice. You want to work through all of the steps that you are anticipating to make sure that you've identified all of the risks and mitigation strategies to be able to minimize those risks. We want to make sure that we get a good outcome for the patients, for the practice, and for your employees. If you don't take the time to go through the steps that you need for email with patients, you are going to miss key points and you're going to have a privacy breach. You might have a HIPAA violation. You're certainly going to have confusion with your employees, and you're going to end up with problems about how you manage your records in your practice with your patients. So please stay tuned, follow this next 7 steps, and see if using email with patients is the right solution for you. Now, if we don't follow these steps, we're going to find that even a little bit of information that goes to the wrong place at the wrong time can result in a privacy breach. And whenever you use technology and you share information in a big way, you can have a big privacy breach really quickly. Now, in this example, Mary received an email message to say that the course that she had signed up for is ready for registration. So if the course that showed up in her email in basket has a subject line, ready to leave your job, people at work might think that Mary is getting ready to move on, that she's not going to be available to continue to contribute to that workplace. She might be passed up with promotions, and certainly a lot of questions might be asked. But Mary might actually be signed up for a program about improving employee retention. Just a little bit of information in the wrong place at the wrong time can be counterintuitive. It might cause problems for Mary. It might cause problems for Mary if she gets an email from her chiropractor or healthcare provider that says your doctor's appointment is 3 o'clock tomorrow. Now, she might have a health issue, but if that email with that health issue is in the email basket of her workplace employer, that could be a problem for Mary. It might be that this is a continuing healthy preventative thing for Mary to do, and it's a good thing, but someone else has looked over her shoulder and sees that she's going to a doctor's appointment tomorrow. So it doesn't take a lot of information before it can be used inappropriately, taken out of context, and cause grief for Mary and for you. Now, it doesn't take a lot for things to happen to have a privacy breach. And unfortunately, there are certainly lots and lots of examples about privacy breaches. And it includes employee information, it includes your healthcare information, your patient information, and your business contacts. When we have employees or your patients' email addresses in your system, and you only intend to keep that email information for confirming appointments, for example, for a very specific purpose, but because that email message is actually there, that email address is available, somebody might pick it up and use it for another purpose. So we need to be careful that we're using it for the intended purpose and that we're limiting the possibility of it being misused for an unintended purpose. So let's take a look and see how you're communicating now with patients. So I've got a short little poll here. So Dr. Al, if we can organize to have the poll show up on the website and just find out how the practitioners here are actually communicating with your patients right now. How many of you are using your website or social media? You currently using email to communicate with your patients, maybe text messaging, or maybe all of the above. Just enter in the letters at the side of the slide here, A, B, C, D, or E, and we'll come back later and find out the results of the poll. So using email with patients is one way to communicate with your patients. And there are lots of different ways and lots of different technologies, but here's a really important part. Regardless of what technology that you are using, if you haven't already built a trusting relationship with the patient, the technology isn't going to work, and in fact might actually cause more problems. So be very clear about what is the purpose that you want to use email with patients. And strongly, don't start using email before you actually see the patient. You're going to build a relationship with the patient before you offer email as a solution to be able to communicate with those patients. So even if you're going to use email for something really simple about confirming patients' appointments, you need to be very clear about how you're going to structure that process. So let's use this as our example. It's very straightforward. We're not going to add a lot of information. It's going to be very simple. We want to confirm your appointment. If you've got any questions, give us a call. So we haven't said which doctor, we haven't said about what appointment, or bring any additional information to the appointment, just that you have an appointment with the physician's office the next day. So here are the 7 steps that I suggest that you need to consider to create an email program with patients for your practice. And you can download the complete document or the white paper about patient-provider email communications from our website, and I believe Dr. Al has the link for you. You don't have to sign up. It's a free download, and you can walk through the steps with your practice and see if this is a good solution for your practice. So the very first thing that you need to do is to plan, and I mean to put this in paper and in writing, not just saying, yeah, we're going to use email and we're going to start on this day. You need to be very clear about establishing clear policies and procedures about when you will and what you won't use email with your patients in your practice. The provider is responsible for disclosing the information and to ensure that you've got reasonable safeguards in place. So you need to make sure that you have this process really well documented. Even a plain email confirming an appointment at a clinic can be sensitive if it's seen by the wrong person at the wrong time. Education. Education is for both the patient, for the staff at the practitioner's office, and for the chiropractor or the healthcare provider. Establish clear, consistent, easy to read and understand education to the patient about the risks of using email and sending and receiving health information. Even then, as the healthcare provider, you are the person of authority on this topic, and you still have responsibility about how patients receive your email. So not only are you responsible for what you include in the message, you're responsible for sending the message, you also have responsibility about how the patient receives the message. So you can't say, well, it's up to the patient to decide how they're going to receive the email. It's not. You actually have to provide additional education to the patient and make sure that they clearly understand how they are going to receive the email, and provide a knowledgeable consent that, yes, I want to receive the email, and yes, I will use it at my own personal private email address that I don't share with anybody else. It's not being forwarded to a work device, and that I am going to be responsible for receiving that email. So you need to provide some education, and a flyer or brochure or closed circuit TV about this new service that you're providing in your practice are some good ways to be able to provide that education. You need to make sure that step number 3, you have authorization from the patient to use email for this very particular purpose. And again, you can't do that unless you actually see the patient first. So don't use email as your first form of contact with the patient before they come into your practice. You want to be able to provide the education and get the authorization, and the only way that you can do that is when they come to your practice first. Be very clear about the purpose that you want to use the email for. So we will talk in a moment about a definition of an e-visit, but be very clear about the purpose of how you're going to use the email. Is it only going to be for appointment confirmations? Is it going to be for communication back and forth to a particular subset of your patient population? Is it for a fitness class or a wellness class, as opposed to somebody who has an acute trauma that you're still navigating the diagnostic and the treatment plan for. One of the things I suggest is that you put things on a pilot program. So you can start with a small group of people for a very particular purpose and work through all the bugs in the process first. It's much easier to start a program with maybe 20 people than it is with 200 people or certainly 2,000 people. Identify a target population that's non-emergency, that they don't have acute problems, that timing isn't of essence to them, and you've already established that trusting relationship. Be very clear about what the criteria is for your patient population and write it down. Be very clear about who your avatar or who your patient is, about who you're going to offer this program to. Offer it as an opportunity to provide a different way of communicating with you. If you offer it as an opportunity, then it is something that you can take back if that doesn't work out for either the patient or for your practice. That way you're not providing email communications to patients that are not the good candidates for it. Maybe they've got problems with spoken English, so written English, it might be even more of a challenge. Maybe they're not technology savvy. You don't want to offer a solution to all of your patients if you know that not all of your patients are going to be able to cope with that. You may end up spending more time providing maintenance to a group of patients that weren't a good option in the first place. So be very clear about what is your patient population. Offer it as a pilot. Be very clear that you've got written documentation about the criteria and the education. You need to get the information in place so that all of your staff can follow that and use it consistently. You also want to be very clear about who is the owner of the process in your practice. Is it going to be the clinic manager, one of your key staff, or perhaps the chiropractor themselves? If people have questions about this, who's going to monitor the process? How are you going to audit that it worked, that you're getting the outcomes that you want, and it's worth the time and energy and technology that you've put into place to make this a solution for you? Be clear about who that person is going to be so that you can be on top of this, because this is something that can get away from you very quickly. We talked about identifying that target audience, and be very clear who that target audience is and what is your outcome. I really strongly suggest that you take a look at using this on a pilot project. There's a little bit of flexibility of trying something. If something goes wrong, you can say, well, it was a pilot project. We tried it in a really confined area, and now we're going back and making sure that we found some problems and we're making it better. Be very clear about your criteria, because you want to be able to measure to see if this is a good way for you to do that practice. Now, one of the questions is about managing the records that come out of that. If your email conversation replaces a whites of the eye, face-to-face, in-person visit, then it might fit the definition of what we call an e-visit. If your email communication fits that definition of an e-visit, you're going to have to consider how you're going to get that email communication in the patient's record. You might be able to use some technology to print it to PDF or attach it to your EMR record if you're using electronic patient records in your practice. Or you could paraphrase that conversation just like you would paraphrase a telephone conversation with the patient and record that in the patient's record. Make sure that you have this as part of your policies and procedures about how you're going to deal with this. As long as you're dealing with it consistently, that you've got it well documented and everybody's doing it the same way, it's probably going to be okay. You've got good standards for your records management practice already. Email is a different modality. As long as you've got the criteria around it, you're probably going to be okay for your records management. But put it in writing first and make sure that you train to that. So using that email communication, you also are going to identify what is not going to be part of that patient record. You might not include out-of-office confirmations, or if the patient replies back to your appointment listing to say, thanks very much, I'll be there, Is that clinically significant? Do you need to keep it in the patient's record? How often do you purge or delete the emails? Who is going to have access to the emails in your practice? How quickly are you going to keep on top of them? Those are all types of things that you need to consider for your records management and for your complete and comprehensive patient records. So why do we need to go through all these steps about something so simple as email? Well, it's part of your job. We want to make sure that we're managing the records consistently, correctly, managing it for patient care. And you're going to get some pushback from patients, and that's okay, because this is an opportunity to let them know that this is important to you. You think that privacy is important. This is an additional opportunity to be able to provide some communication, but you want to make sure that you're doing the right thing at the right time. Patients will accept that, and they'll appreciate it, and they'll have a better understanding about how important it is that they stay involved in this and be part of the solution and not create additional problems. If you want to use email to continue to provide improving care and treatment, then we need to make sure that we care about this. We want to make sure that we take the time and energy to make this work, and it does take time and energy. If you decide that today that you want to implement an email solution, you have it up and ready for tomorrow, you probably missed a whole bunch of steps. It does take time and effort to be able to do that. Dr. Al, I'm available for any questions, and people can contact me here. And you can also download the information from our website and have access to the white page about patient-provider email communications.